With me here, obviously we did a China video a couple weeks ago that got a few million views on a lot of content, so I wanted to go a little bit deeper. We reached out to General Robert Spalding, who wrote a book called Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. I literally couldn't put this book down, and once you read it as well, we'll put the link below, you'll know exactly why. He was the former senior director of strategy at the National Security Council, and he was kind enough to fly out to Dallas for us to have this conversation together about US, China, 5G, and a lot of other technical issues that have to do with that. Having said that, thanks for coming out. Appreciate you for making the time.
Thanks for having me. Great
Yes,
to be here.
so was it when you went to China? I'm curious.
So first time it was 2002. So I actually went to language training at Monterey, the Defense Language Institute.
DLI?
Studied
Yep.
China for 52 weeks. It's a 62-week course. I left in 52 weeks in June of 2002. Steph and I and our two boys went in the country and lived in Shanghai, in Pudong, on the east side of the city, and that's the side that the Communist Party built up in the 90s. So that's where the Jinmao building is and a lot of the financial district of Shanghai. And we just traveled the country and lived with the people, and it was probably one of the most phenomenal 2 years of my life.
It was a phenomenal experience.
It was
for you.
incredible. You know, the people were great. They're hardworking, resilient people, and you know, having learned the language before I got there, I could communicate and really travel all over and really got to know how they think. And you know, in a lot of ways, you know, not really fully understanding what was going on. I don't think you can live in China and fully understand what it is to be Chinese. But for me, as an outsider looking at that country, it was exciting, and it was a place that I wanted to be. And so when I left in 2004, I told Stephanie that, hey, when I retire from the Air Force, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to start a business and get wealthy.
So that was the plan, to want to come back.
That was the plan.
Now, what's your rank at that time when you were there in 2002?
So when I got there, I had just made major.
So you were already.
I'd been in 10 years at the time.
You had been in 10 years. You were major.
Right.
And what was your job? What were you doing in China for U.S.?
So the Olmsted program, which is a program that I was selected for, essentially picks 3 officers from each branch of the service and sends them to language school. It's not for you to go into a country that has English as a national language, but a foreign language, and so and then sends you in the country for 2 years. And I went to a university in Shanghai, Tongji University, and studied MBA courses, and really it was about getting to know the people. It was really becoming immersed in what it was to understand China, the Chinese culture and history and the language.
So does China know that you're going in as a major? Is that a something that it's a basic open conversation? Hey, we're sending one of our majors from Air Force to spend a couple years with you?
One of the great things about the Olmsted Scholar Program is that you do everything on your own. So once you're accepted into the program and you go to language training, it's upon your responsibility to go and get accepted into university, to apply for a visa, because they want you to understand what it takes to travel to a foreign country. And so it's almost like being on a sabbatical. You don't have a detailer that you're talking to. You're basically cut loose on your own recognizance to go and figure it out.
But you're getting paid, so the military
still getting paid.
Okay.
I mean, it is really an incredible opportunity, because you're really learning because you don't have a lot of support. You know, you're out there by yourself, trying to figure it out. And you know, there was, you know, how do I get there, become a student, get a student visa, but also how do I get my family in there, and how do I make sure that so we had to take them out of country every 60 or every 90 days to 6 months to renew the visa and come back in.
So China didn't know you were there and you were a major.
They didn't. I was not there in an official capacity.
I wasn't there on
an official visa or on a diplomatic passport. I was there on basically a tourist passport with a student visa going to a university. Now, when I met Chinese, I would tell them, hey, I'm in the Air Force, I'm a B-2 pilot. Of course, they thought that was quite strange that I would be there, but you know.
That's exactly what I would be thinking about, because from what you read on culture, you sense a certain level of, not paranoia or suspicious, but why are you here? What do you do? Are you a spy? You'd look like a CIA guy. I mean, if you go there, I'd look at you saying maybe you are working and you're trying to gather intel to bring you back, but that was actually not the case.
But this was 2002 to 2004, and what was happening there, if you remember, China just entered the WTO, so it was breakneck speed to grow the country and grow the economy. And all of my neighbors were there building factories for Fortune 100 companies, and so there was a lot less scrutiny on me as a military guy. I think it was the country at the time was focused on making money, and certainly people found out who I was, but I didn't get a lot of scrutiny.
That's good to hear that they didn't do anything. Now, the second time when you went back was what year?
The second time I went back was in December of 2016, and that was to be the defense attaché in Beijing.
And this time around, this is a little bit more public. They know a little bit more that you're going, or still same situation?
No. This is definitely. I am the senior defense official representing the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs to the Chinese military, the People's Liberation Army in Beijing. And so for example, I got there a week before they took the UUV. I don't know if you remember, but they took one of our underwater gliders in the South China Sea. Essentially while one of our ships was trying to retrieve it. And so there was a big
controversy.
There was a big diplomatic controversy, and that was beginning to be a crisis. And I was the one that negotiated the return with the People's Liberation Army of that glider to the U.S.
What?
But I guarantee you the Chinese are in your networks, and the Russians, and the North Koreans, and everybody else.
You guarantee?
I guarantee it. They're in your networks. They're in everybody's networks. This is what they do. And so if they're in your networks...
That's strong statements. You're saying you're guaranteeing China and Russia's in our network.
I guarantee it. I guarantee it, particularly because you put out that video on China. I guarantee they've come at this place. But so who's responsible for protecting you from that?
Government?
No.
I would assume. Then
no.
Who is it?
Not at all. The government protects their own networks. They don't protect your networks.
Got it.
So
you're saying responsibility on the entrepreneur
you're responsible
to do that.
to protect your own network. And then, of course, do you have a Twitter account?
I do.
Okay. Twitter's responsible for protecting that.
Twitter is responsible for protecting my account on Twitter.
Right.
And I'm responsible for protecting my network.
Your data.
My data,
right,
what
right.
have you, which we have, we've invested in.
It's not the U.S. government.
Sure, but now let me ask you this. So I had a former undercover FBI agent right here. He sat in that chair 3 weeks ago. So I asked him, I said, so what is the real, line you don't cross between the government protecting me, right? Because the government getting too involved and, hey, the whole Apple going to DMV getting IDs, not Apple, the government going to the DMV and saying we want to get the licenses, and then government getting to Apple and saying we want to be able to get access to the phone conversations in case a terrorist does this. Well, in China, because some people will say, well, China is set up in a way where they feel like they're a company and they control what everybody does because they work for the company, right? Where America looks at, this is actually how I view America. America sees their citizens as 1099. China sees their citizens as W-2. So because they have more control, it's tougher to infiltrate their system than America's because America kind of leaves everybody alone. Would you agree with that? Where we are left a little bit more to ourselves without the top having access to the private companies to get data to see if anybody's tapping into our systems or no?
You mean from our government perspective?
Yes.
You're left totally alone.
Do you think that's okay?
No, I don't think it's okay.
Oh, so you're saying they should be more involved?
They should be involved in protecting your data. They should be involved in ensuring that there is not undue influence placed on you by a foreign nation so that you are making decisions based on influence that's coming from outside our borders.
Okay, so now somebody's watching this and saying, well, Pat, that's exactly what a big government guy would say, because let them control us and they can do they know what's best for us to keep us safe.
I'm not saying that the government has access to your data.
You're saying they should.
They should not have access to your data. They should ensure that nobody else has access to your data either.
Why wouldn't
so do you remember San Bernardino? And there's an argument between Apple and FBI.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And Apple said, we're not giving you the back door.
I remember that clearly.
Okay?
Yeah.
So think about that in the context of what we're talking about here. I don't think anybody should have that back door to have access to your data. A foreign country,
so you're not saying
our
that.
own country.
Okay.
No, nobody should. What I'm saying is the only one that should have say over who has access to your data is you. That's what it means to live in a democracy,
Okay.
in a digital world.
But then this gives me the question. So if you're saying the only one that should have access to my data, that's fine. We're in agreement there. But if China is hacking into my data and getting access to what I'm doing, you're saying the government should prevent that from happening. How can they do that if they don't have access to what I'm doing?
Well, they can have access to the network. They don't have to have access to your data, right? Because if your data is encrypted, they can't actually see what your data is, but they can certainly see what China's doing. I mean, that piece, I'm confident that we have an understanding of what they're doing within our networks. Just their actual protecting that or preventing that from happening doesn't occur. That's why, by the way, China built the Great Firewall, because they wanted to protect their population, because they realized that if they didn't protect their population, then globalization and the open internet would allow for democratic values to seep in. So they wanted to protect their people from influence that came from outside the country.
You think that's a good move?
I think that's a great move, because if you're connected to a totalitarian regime and you're open, and the totalitarian regime is intent on influencing your population, the way we've designed our current internet absolutely allows for
But
it.
doesn't that mean that we become totalitarian if we do that as well? Like, to match against them, we kind of have to.
If we did what they did, right? So they didn't
Which means
protect
what?
they didn't protect their individual data from them as a government. They just protected it from the outside. So they built a wall around it. What I'm telling you is you have control over your data. Not the government, not our government, not their government, not Twitter, not Facebook, that you own it. And so if Facebook wants to sell your data, then they have to get your permission and may even have to pay you to do so.
If they want to sell my
If they want to
information.
sell your data.
Who are you more concerned about, the totalitarian regime or the large technology companies?
I would say today they have the same business model.
Really?
Of course.
Tell me why.
Look at them today. Both China and Facebook have sensors. China sends their sensors to school. What do the sensors learn? The sensors actually learn about Tiananmen Square, the truth, right?
Okay.
Because they have to censor that discussion on the network. Facebook has sensors. The sensors go to school to learn what they need to censor on Facebook's network, right? Same business model. It's about free data. It's about using that data, except for this one, it's about profit. For this one, it's about control. And they, even down to the sensors, they have the same model.
You're putting them at the same level. Wow.
I'm not
putting
saying,
those guys at the same-
no, I'm not at the same level, because one is about profit, one's about control. What I'm telling you is the system that we built, the technological foundations of the system we built, then the app services and business models that we built on top of that allow for power to be equated with aggregation of data. When you do that, you create business models. The business model of a large tech company is equivalent to the business model of China.
So do you think, you know how for them, like they don't allow Twitter, Facebook, YouTube to go in, they have their own mission for one reason. Like, you know, you listen to Joe Biden. He's been in the world, in the political world for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay. Did he start off, you know, having to play all these political games that you have to play, or was it a good cause? And then you look at Mitch McConnell, two names that you talk about in your book. One's a Republican, one's a Democrat. And they're both have some ties to China, right? One, Mitch McConnell, 1993, I think he married his wife, whose father's a very powerful, I don't know if you want to say the business owner, entrepreneur, and they're connected to the communistic regime. And then on the other side, Joe Biden, his son, Hunter, it's all over the news. Everybody's hearing about all the issues with what happened there. I ask it again, this is not something that's favorable to Democrats not liking China or wanting to support China, or this is not just Republicans not liking China or disliking China. This is purely on both sides on what you're seeing.
All right.
And when you went and investigated more, were you kind of like, oh my gosh, I didn't know the Biden family was like this, or the McConnell, was it one of those things where the more and more and more research and investigation you did, the more like this is bigger than you thought it was? Did you have one of those moments yourself?
Well, there was, so the one moment that I had was when I got the briefing in the fall of 2014 that was from one of the major audit firms. And when I opened that briefing and I realized, a lot of the elements that we would use to attack a country using an air attack, I saw play out in front of my eyes using economics, finance, and information. And so, that was the moment. It broke my mind, because up until that point, I thought America's the greatest nation on earth, and we're unassailable, we're the most powerful, nothing could happen to us. And that was the point when I realized that, no, we could have carrier battle groups, nuclear subs, F-35s, and all of this capability and spend $800 billion a year on defense. But if our society was basically being attacked at their job level, at their societal level, then we had lost the ability to protect our nation in a globalized, internet-powered world. And from that point on, I just started studying. And I read everything I could, and I talked to everybody I could. So because I had been at the Council on Foreign Relations, I had access to a lot of executives of finance companies, of investment companies. And so I started going around and talking to some of their research offices, and talking to people and trying to understand what was going on in our country and how global business worked, how global finance worked, how did investment work. And did I ever stop finding rot? No. I find it every single day. As you continue to pull back the layers of it, you realize it goes through our society, because it's based on this fundamental belief that openness will lead to democracy. And that is a key to China, the Chinese Communist Party's power, because when we believe that openness would lead to democracy, they said, there's my opportunity, because they're going to let me have access to their finance, their trade, their investment, their immigration, their media, their politics, the internet, academia. I have access to everything. Now you were in the military, right? If I had any of the relationships that I just talked about, there is no way I could have a security clearance. Wouldn't happen. I could not get that through the system. It would not grant me a top secret security clearance.
If you were, let me clarify, if you're Mitch McConnell or Joe Biden with those relationships, you wouldn't be able to get the security clearance that you have.
Right.
Fair enough. Okay.
Right?
Yep. Absolutely.
This is just facts. So, if I had taken my my email or my work email and basically taken that all off and put it on a server and had some classified message, what do you think would have happened to me?
You're fired. You're
court-martialed.
Yeah,
right?
Court-martialed. Absolutely.
Kicked out.
It's not even 180.
Right? No,
you're done.
there's no doubt.
Sure.
And so, as you see these things, these kinds of things that I know that whoever gets elected as commander-in-chief has a responsibility. They are the chief diplomat. They're the chief law enforcement officer. They're the commander-in-chief. So how can that person have the kind of relationships that I, as a military member, can't even have a security clearance with, or do the kind of things that I would be fired or court-martialed with? So, it's pretty black and white to me. When you're the commander-in-chief and you are requiring the people that work for you, that swear an oath, that are working for you as the chief executive, particularly commander-in-chief, because commander of a military force is much different than being the senior executive at a company. It's a completely different type of authority over somebody. The authority to not just fire, but also imprison, right? Because that's court-martial authority. And yet you do the things that you say or you must enforce that they cannot do. Then you've created a problem. And this is pervasive in our system, that our politicians can have the kind of relationships that we can't even allow our military members to have security clearances having. Let's leave that aside. Okay, we'll just set that aside.
Okay.
Now you have the President of the United States saying, here's a non-market economy that we basically let into the WTO in 2001, and they broke every rule in the book and continue to, and they're not going to stop. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to treat them just like we did prior to going to the WTO. Prior to going to the WTO, they had to have a vote on most favored nation status every single year, right? Once that stopped, then corporate money started pouring in. Foreign direct investment started pouring into China, and they grew like crazy. They took 70,000 factories and 3.4 million manufacturing jobs. And so the President of the United States says, okay, they're clearly don't have any intention on following the rules. We're going to put tariffs on, because that's what we had before. we started and we let them in. We're going to do the same exact thing. And then you have Joe Biden and you have Mitch McConnell saying that's a bad idea. Now, do those relationships contribute to that, or is it just because they believe that? I don't know the answer to that, but I guarantee you any counterintelligence officer that brought me into interrogation asking me why I made that decision, they would have grounds to say, you're untrustworthy. You didn't report that, your relative was making, millions of dollars from the Chinese, or you didn't report that you got millions of dollars from the Chinese. So I'm not saying that there's quid pro quo there, but there's enough of, hey, I don't like tariffs, to, hey, I've adopted Xi Jinping's worldview, to, hey, this is actually harmful to the United States. I leave it to other people to kind of figure that out. It's not for me to figure out. It is for me to say that if I had done it on active duty in the military, I'd either not have a security clearance, I'd have been court-martialed.
So let me ask you this. That same argument, you got two different communities here, okay? You got those who have political power and influence, say McConnell, Biden, and many other names who support China, and they're saying, hey, take it easy.
Right.
They're an ally. I think you went to the Department of Commerce and they said, China's not the adversary, they're our friends, we cooperate with them.
Right.
These were the words you wrote in your book, right? Okay. So on one side you have the political people, that they shouldn't be doing this, because if they have interest with their kids, wife, whatever, okay. Then the other side is investors, business owners, hedge fund folks, entrepreneurs, folks who made their money in America, yet they want to make sure China still has the ability to do business because they lose money, right?
Of course.
This goes to the bottom line.
Right.
Do you think their motives is okay because it's just purely money and they want to protect their investments for themselves, their clients, their businesses, and these two are complete different ways to be held accountable?
That's the system we built, right?
You know what I'm asking,
I know
obviously.
exactly what
Okay.
you're asking. That's the system we built. And so you can't criticize businessmen because our system says you owe fiduciary responsibility to the shareholder. That's your job. And oh, by the way, you can actually be sued or brought up on charges for not doing your job, not fulfilling your fiduciary responsibility. So there could be an argument made that if you're not cooperating with the Chinese Communist Party, that you're actually harming your company. Okay?
There you go.
Right?
Okay.
So you can't criticize them for that. What you can criticize is the policies of the government that allowed for the behavior to occur in the first place. And I'll give you an example. Level 1 versus level 3 assets. I talk about it in the book. China has non-convertible currency, strict capital controls. Since 2015, you can't get money out of the country, only in special circumstances, and only depending on what the business you're doing. So we have plenty of corporations that have billions of dollars over there that they're carrying on their financial statements as level 1 assets, meaning just like cash in the bank here. But you can't get it. And so, but if you're showing profits and it's going into cash in the bank in China, then how are you being compensated as an executive or on a board of directors for that company? You're probably getting compensated based on the money you're making in China. But yet the shareholders can never see that money because you have strict capital controls in a non-convertible currency. Okay, so we've created an incentive system just based on our accounting standards, FASB, and the Securities and Exchange Commission can change this. The Treasury Department could change this and say, no, if it's in China, it's non-convertible currency, strict capital controls, they can't get the money out, it's a level 3 asset. And therefore, all you corporations need to do a restatement. What would that say? Now CEOs wouldn't want to invest in China because it wouldn't count toward their compensation. Now board of directors wouldn't advise the CEOs that they should invest in China because it wouldn't count towards their compensation. We build a system that incentivizes behavior for the destruction of the country.
Yeah.
That's not the fault of the business community. That's the fault of the government.
Great point. So essentially a company who runs a sales organization runs a compensation structure that produces bad behavior. It's not the salesperson's fault. It's the organization's fault for producing the compensation structure the way it did. So what you're saying is a complete restructure of our agreements and arrangements with China. You're talking about having to change a lot of things for us to move forward.
Let's go into investing. So right now we have MSCI All World Index went from 0 to 5% to 20% weighting in Chinese equities, right? Okay, Chinese companies, they come here, they register stocks and list on some of our exchanges, but let's go the unlisted ones, the registered ones. That's $1 trillion they've made off our capital markets. There's no audit or transparency requirements that resembles anything that a U.S. company has to follow, right? So a Chinese company can come in here and get registered and get listed on our stock exchange and get access to our retirement funds. That's what MSCI All World Index is followed by all the institutional investors and the endowments, the university endowments. So our retirement funds get sent over to China to pay for investments that we have no idea actually what they have because they don't have the same audit and transparency requirements of a U.S. company. That's a policy that we have right now. So China can register and list their stocks on our exchanges, and our retirement investment officers can send money over to China, and they don't have to correspond to the same rules that U.S. companies have to. So make Chinese companies correspond to the exact same rules that U.S. companies have to, and I'll tell you why they won't. Because sending over the audit data is a national security violation in China. In other words, it is treason for you to send the audit information from a Chinese company to the U.S. As I say in the book, from 2011 to 2013, they poured more concrete in those 2 years than we did in the entire 20th century.
It's very important for you to state this one more time. They did more in 2 years of pouring concrete, I remember the stat, than U.S. did in 114 years.
Yes.
Is that a factual statement?
That's a factual statement.
I'm gonna find it, and let's put because if that is true, in 2 years versus 114, what was that all about when you talk about that? They're building 90 to 120 cities with the average population of 5 to 10 million, and one of the cities becoming the Silicon Valley. It's like by a lake, but they won't give the name of what the city's name is going to be, and it's got 550 square feet of office space with 95% is not occupant, and they're willing to sell it for cheap and rent it for cheap. Like, is that really part of the strategy?
If you want to keep people employed and you have one model and you're facing a financial challenge, then you go back to the model. It's just like if it's working, don't make it quit. The problem that they run into is can they get the raw materials and the energy and the food to actually sustain that? And what they've needed to do that is to get U.S. dollars, and we've enabled them through our trading relationship with them to do that. You know, recently with the tariffs, they've had to dip into the capital markets and get through MSCI, get money from our retirement funds. But for the most part, it keeps people employed, and that, by the way, is also why the Belt and Road Initiative exists. It's not just an opportunity to really gain control of the Eurasian landmass. It's also an ability to offload some of its spare capacity in order to employ Chinese. You know, they harvest most of the world's frozen fish, right? They export 50% of their catch, right? And there's 1 million people employed in the frozen fish industry, right? So it's all about keeping people employed, and so while they dominate these industries, it's not because not merely because they want to dominate the industry. It's because they want to maintain legitimacy. The way you maintain legitimacy is keep people employed.
90 to 120 cities with a population of 5 to 10 million? That's nuts to me. To be able to build something like that.
Well, think about it. If you're going to build a city, though, the best way to build a city is to build it a total greenfield, right? If you're building a city, or if you're increasing the size of a city, say like Shanghai, it's far more expensive than it is just to go out in the middle of a field and build a city, right? You don't have to do you don't have to tear down and rebuild and rezone and go through all the things. You just build a city, and I think if you think about how they financed it with our recovery money, a lot of the loans came from U.S. banks with recovery money, and the price of those things collapsed, as I talk about in the book. Now you have an ability to move the extra 300 or 400 million of people that are out in the country into those cities.
I mean, that's a very
it's
brilliant formula. Absolutely. What's the motive behind not allowing you to foreclose on your home? Like if you have a $100,000 loan on your home, you're late $4,000. They don't foreclose on the home. They just add the $4,000 that you're late on the loan. Now it's $104,000. Is that actually the banking system?
It's brilliant.
Is that really what they do?
Yes, it's brilliant.
You're serious? So that is a real actual methodology for them?
Right.
Did you understand that part? Like, so you got a $100,000 loan. I'm going through crisis. I miss a couple payments. I still stay in the home. They just tack it on the loan at the end.
Oh, you're not even in the home. You probably got 4 or 5 of these things.
Do you think that's a good formula, though?
Good formula for what?
for any other person, any other banking system to use.
Well, but when you have a strict capital controls and a
Nationalized-
non-convertible currency, you have essentially a closed financial system. These banks can't get their money out.
So you can keep doing that.
You can keep doing
nonstop.
it.
That's just unbelievable.
It's brilliant.
Yeah. So if
If we were doing that,
Yeah.
dollars would be flowing out of this country.
well, let me ask, because, okay, let's transition into 5G. Let's talk
Right.
about 5G, because you know this whole thing when I think Trump tweeted out something in 2014, and he said, remember, China is not our friends or not our ally. And he got like 300 retweets. It wasn't something big. He tweeted this back in 2014 or 2015. And then all of a sudden, you know, one day, everybody in the news is talking about 5G. And prior to that day, we weren't really talking about it. And all of a sudden, hey, we got to be the leader in 5G. I'm like, 5G? So I'm going to start looking 5G. Okay, 1G, 2G, 3G. 1G is the regular phone back in the days. 2G is whatever. 3G is the iPhone, you know, and then 4G is the latest phone. And then now 5G is going to be changing the game. And most people go to, well, 5G is just a faster phone, right? Because that's what initially, we've always seen the G linked to a phone. Oh my gosh, I can download a movie in 3.6 seconds now on Netflix, a 2-hour movie, where before it was 3 minutes or 6 minutes, whatever, right? When you think about 5G, what do you think about of 5G and the capabilities and what it can really do to whoever that has access to it?
That's a good question. So if you go back to 2007 when the iPhone came out,
2007.
the top 5 in market cap were AT&T, General Electric, Microsoft, ExxonMobil, and Shell. Right? The phone comes out in 2007. I had one, 3G network. It's not a very good experience. 4G network comes out. By the way, we're the second country in the world to build a 4G network. Now you've got something, right? So when Steve Ballmer laughed at Steve Jobs, said, we don't need one of those. When you took the platform, which was the iPhone, and you married it up to the 4G network, which was the pipe for data, and it was a fast enough pipe, now you could create the apps, services, and business models that in 10 years led to the top 5 in market cap being Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google, and Microsoft, right? So the Chinese see this and they're like, the platform and the pipe. So the smartphone, this iPhone, you know, which was the first one, then Android. So Apple and Google, right, dominate the mobile platform that the app services and business models of that economy are built on. Now look at the iPhone. It's a hardware, software, tightly integrated, closed-walled system like Steve Jobs liked, and the data was encrypted. Why was the data encrypted? Why did San Bernardino happen? Because Apple's an American company, right? They know you want privacy. They encrypt their phone. So now you've got the platform, and Android also went on to encrypt their platform. So both encrypted, right? So private devices. Take the cloud away from it. Just look at the device itself.
Sure.
It's meant to be a private device. Right. Why? It's American product. Fast forward, you know, to 2009. China starts to look at that. Says, okay, we want to dominate the next level, right? Not just the technology. We want the apps, services, and business models to be Chinese companies. And so Huawei gets hundreds of billions of dollars to develop 5G and ZTE. But then you have Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. So they're behind the Chinese firewall. They're protected. You can't have the fangs going in there. It's just the bats that control the e-economy within China. And then you start, at the same time you're developing 5G, right, the platform, and I'll get to that in a second, but you're also developing Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. So now when you walk into, and you're starting to see the emergence of the 5G world in China. So you walk into a restaurant after you've ordered your food, and a camera picks you up, and you said, hey, David, welcome, here's your food, right? So you're starting to get the feel of what a 5G world is. And what is a 5G world? The platform is the network. So this is mobile computing paired with a pipe. 5G is computing and networking combined on the same platform. So this goes away. You walk outside your door and you say Uber. You don't get on your phone and say, I want an Uber. You just say Uber. Camera picks up your face or a microphone picks up you.
Come on.
That's what 5G is. That's what 5G is. And then the Uber shows up. There's a camera on the car that sees you, knows who you are, Don't have to ask you your name. You get in and you go to wherever you want. You get out and you go do whatever you want. So in this world, in the 4G world, this is a platform. It's yours, right? You don't want to be you don't want to be part of that, all of that data. Remember we just talked about how do you influence society? You don't want all that data to be out there about what you're doing. Just don't carry one of these, right? Just opt out. In a 5G world, you cannot opt out. Who owns the data? This, you could conceivably say, you lease the data on here you own. If you're getting Google services, you don't own that data. But in the 5G world, not only can you not opt out because it's built around the city, it's not in your phone anymore. Not only can you not opt out, you don't know who owns the data. Everything that you do can be watched. And for every person by 2022, there's going to be, there's 2 cameras for every person. There's two people for every camera in China by 2022.
They have 1 billion right now on surveillance.
Right,
A billion
right.
cameras in China right
with
now.
With artificial intelligence for facial recognition, right? So all of this is getting built right now in China. And who's helping them do it? Microsoft, Google, right? All of these companies that want to deploy this world into our country. So Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, that's where the world goes. It goes from 2007, AT&T, GE, and Microsoft to the FANGs to the BATs, right? Who owns the pipes? Me as a B2 guy, the first thing I look at in the country is where's the telecommunications? You've got to take that out, number one. But if rather instead of taking it out, you own or control it, so Huawei builds the pipes, then because you're behind the Great Firewall, you've built the app services and business models of the 5G world. And you're, like I said, you're already starting to see that. You know, where your facial recognition is built into your interaction when you go into a restaurant or when you go into a store, or when you go into a bank. You know, everything's about, you know, the device is connected. Then as you build the network, then those proliferate. So 4G network, 10,000 devices per square mile. 5G network, 3 million devices per square mile. You're not going to carry 12 smartphones. You may not even carry a smartphone.
10,000 to 3 million?
10,000 to 3 million. That's what 5G does. The connectivity explodes, right? So that allows you to put devices literally everywhere that can make your life more convenient or can track you. There's a bike in DC. It's called Mobike. Have you seen these things? They're silver and orange. Look out for them next time you're in DC. They're silver and orange, called Mobike. They had them when I was in 2016 when I get to Beijing. You take your phone, and by the way, I took a phone, right, a phone that I threw away when I got home, and I had said,
You threw it away when you got home.
I threw it away when I got home. Load all the apps on it that a Chinese person has so I can understand what they do. You never have to carry a wallet. You never have to carry a key. It's all done on your phone. You can pay anybody, anywhere for anything, and they do. 900 people are on WeChat, and they spend 90% of their time in app doing things, or ordering airline tickets, buying food, whatever you want. You can have anything you
900
want.
people or 900 million?
900 million people. Okay, so let me explain to you how effective what they built is. I have one of the guys working for me on one of these Mobikes. Now, the Mobike it's just parked there in the street with a lock on it. You go over, you hit a QR code on your phone, it unlocks the bike, you get on it, you ride it, and you lock the bike. Okay, so where does that data go? They know it's you. You got on that bike, you went 2 locations, okay, or you went to a location, so that data is available. So I have one of my guys, he gets on a Mobike, rides somewhere, has his iPad in the basket, gets off the bike, comes back to the embassy, and realizes, I forgot my iPad. Goes into the regional security office and says, I forgot my iPad and my bike. Calls a local public security bureau, and those guys call the guy that's got his iPad on his phone, on his cell phone, and say, can you bring the iPad back to the embassy? That's how wired Beijing is right now.
So if I'm, and by the way, I heard about self-regulating brake pads, self-regulating. Is that really the case? Like your brake pads are going to be fixing them?
Everything. There is the very high speed, low latency things like if you need a surgeon in Dallas to perform surgery on somebody that's 60 miles away, he can do that from his office in Dallas, and you can have a robot, in 60 miles away doing the surgery. It's called the tactile internet. That's coming. That's part of this fabric. In addition to this kind of low power thing like you're talking about that just sends a signal, hey, I've got somebody passed by this location, or I need to change a brake pad. All of that is built into the 5G network. So it really becomes a network of machines, not a network of people. But more importantly, there is terabytes and terabytes of data that's created about you, and you have no control over it. And the people that do have control over it are the large tech companies, and increasingly, because 5G, not just Huawei builds a network, but the 3GPP standards, which is the industry standard-making body, has been dominated by China. And so not only the standards have been dominated by China, the underlying patents for the technology of 5G have been dominated by China. So even if you're not building Huawei, you're still building Chinese technology into your network. So you have Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei, you have the technology, and you have the app services and business models. You have everything you need, right? So you used to have Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google dominant. As those other companies become dominant because they've created the 5G world, now you're going to see the ability for China to deploy control literally everywhere.
Final thoughts here before we leave. Your thoughts. I am an investor. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an executive. I'm seeing what's going on with China. I'm watching this. I'm a little bit more educated. I'm about to order your book. I haven't ordered it. I'm going to click on the link, order it, and read the whole thing because obviously you can't get the 230 pages in a 2-hour sit down. What should I be thinking about and adapting or making certain audibles right now for my career to prepare myself for the next 12, 24, 60 months in the future?
I would pick up the Constitution. I would pick up the Atlanta Charter. I'd read those two things, and I'd think about it, because my campaign is about making sure that those things last. And if they last, and you continue to do business in the way that you're doing, you're going to go broke.
If you continue to do business the way that you're going, you're going to go broke.
Because you can ignore me, you can get on my side, or you can fight me. But my goal is to preserve the Constitution. The way we do it is to preserve the way, the rules of the road that we created. And I'm about establishing those rules. And if you're doing business and you're making money from the Chinese Communist Party, and you think that that's the way that you're going to continue to make money going forward, if you think that this government is going to support that, I think you're 100% wrong. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen.
Fair enough.